for many of us, this is our fourth or fifth week. I'm starting to lose track. That's in our stay-at-home quarantine state. And many of us are kind of settling into a routine, a pattern. But these are indeed strange times. If you live locally, you may have experienced pretty significant weather yesterday. We had what I could only describe as a very severe windstorm yesterday morning. And at one point, I was chasing my trash can down the street in my pajamas while simultaneously trying not to get hit by an extra large trampoline that was blowing through the streets. And the image that came to mind was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz when she's trying desperately to get into the safe place. As you know, really, I thought about that a lot yesterday. I've never, ever been in that kind of wind before. And it was difficult to stand up straight. As I was reflecting on this later, I realized that many of us, that yesterday's windstorm was sort of a metaphor for how many of us have been feeling over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, which is, I'm not sure I can stand up straight. That the intensity of the anxiety and the fear and the overwhelm related to the unpredictability of our situation is such that it can be really, really destabilizing and feel very storm-like. This led me to think about an article that I read late last week. And the article was really an article that was written about how to best support children during this pandemic in terms of what they most need emotionally. And there are 2 things identified, that these are what children need more than anything else right now. But as I was reading the article, I realized that it's not just children that need these 2 fundamental things. It's all of us. And the 2 things are, number 1, the need to feel safe. And number 2, the need to feel attached or connected. The need to feel safe and the need to feel attached and connected. When you look at even something as old, yet as important as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that hierarchy of what all human beings need in order to feel fulfilled, it makes perfect sense that first and foremost, we all need, in order to thrive, a sense of safety, a sense of security, a sense of certainty. Many of us who have walked the path of addiction and/or have been the friend or family member of someone who's walked the path of addiction have had the experience of not growing up, of not being that child who felt safe, and of not being that child who felt deeply attached or connected in really healthy ways. So the connection I started making between what I read last week and the situation that many of us have found ourselves in is really related to these 2 very, very fundamental needs. And were they met in our early lives? And were they sustained as we grew up? And are they being met right now? And that is our need for safety and our need for attachment and connection. The need for safety right now is really tough. We ourselves don't feel safe because there's this unpredictable virus out there that we cannot see, that we cannot really sense unless and until we start to have the symptoms, but we know that it's out there. Many of us don't feel financially safe. We don't feel professionally safe. Many of us might not even be feeling relationally safe, especially if we find ourselves living with our children, our partners, 24/7 because of the stay-at-home rule. Some of us, myself included, are living alone through this. We live in our homes alone. And so that can feel unsafe. And because we're not having physical contact with the people that matter most to us in our lives, we can feel like that sense of connection or attachment is also been fractured. So when we think about what's happening now, right, it makes perfect sense that these two fundamental needs that children have, that all human beings have, we really need to think about and maybe have at the forefront of our consciousness. Do I feel safe? And do I feel connected? So when it comes to safety, we might want to start thinking about what are the things in my life that I can do today to contribute to my sense of safety. It might be something as simple as, I feel safe when I know that I have enough food in the refrigerator to support me feeling well. So it might mean I need to venture out, put my mask on later, venture out and get to Wegmans. It might mean that I look into the pantry and make sure that I have a flashlight that has batteries. Given what happened yesterday and the power was on and off, having a flashlight on hand that has batteries and is working contributes to our safety. It might be reaching out to people that we know that we value and making sure that we have a regular connection with them on a regular basis as a way to respond to that need we have for attachment. So given the fact that both safety and connection are inherently naturally compromised right now because of this pandemic, how can we create those things for ourselves? One of the things I mentioned yesterday in another class that I was teaching, the majority of people in this particular class have children who are at home right now. And the question was, are your children feeling safe? Are your children feeling attached right now? Are they feeling connected? And let me just see here. I was hearing some background noise. Sorry about that. So if you have children at home, what kinds of things can you say to them? How can you be with them in ways that allow them to feel safe and allow them to feel attached? One of the things that we know, most people will report that their children seem to be doing great, right? That their children really seem to be stepping up and showing signs of resilience. But we're not quite sure yet. It's too early to know whether or not that's true. If our children sense that we are afraid, they will often become little adults and not show their own fear. So it's really important that we interact with them in ways, to the degree that it's possible, to make them feel safe and to make them feel connected. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed as a way for all of you to think about how you're caring for yourselves. If it's true that what is most needed right now is that we all feel a sense of safety and that we all feel a sense of attachment, how are you managing this very real truth? And then going back to how it is in the first place that we are all gathered here today is asking the same question of the earliest part of our lives, what we refer to as our first family. And your first family was your family of origin, or whoever those individuals were that you came into the system strictly through your birth, and that's who was there. For good or bad, these were the people who were around you. And were they able to provide that sense of safety and that sense of positive attachment and connection? And if not, trust me, you figured out a way to provide that for yourself. Good or bad, you figured out a way. And many of us are here because we came to understand that the way that we figured out helped us to survive, but it wasn't necessarily that functional. And we are here because we want to heal that. And we are here because we want to find really healthy ways to feel safe and very healthy ways of feeling attached and connected. So I wanted to introduce to you something that I planned on teaching last week, but we ran out of time. And this is the notion of what are called your relationship rights. And your relationship rights are very similar to your human rights. What many of us don't realize, and I promise you, when the time comes and you can go out and about, if you were to ask people, are you aware of your relationship rights? Do you practice them? Do you protect them? Most people will not know what you're talking about. And yet, our connections are so essential to our own survival. It's crazy to imagine that we don't engage in our relationships in a way that we actually protect our own relational rights. And we don't necessarily sometimes behave in ways where we're protecting the rights of others. So in today's session, I wanted to introduce to you all 25 of our human relationship rights. And I want you to just kind of take them in and ask yourself, wow, which of these rights might I need to focus on a little bit more? Which of these rights do I really defend and protect as a way of keeping myself safe? In other words, which do I need to work on? And when you think about your relationships with other people in your life, asking yourself, when I'm interacting with these individuals, am I violating any of these rights? And some of the ways in which we violate these rights really does come out of the way in which we were socialized to relate in our first families. And so it's okay to admit and to see and to understand that, yeah, I violate this right in other people all the time, but I can change that because we're learning, and many of us are relearning, and we are rewiring, and that is why we are here at 7 o'clock in the morning, because we know that doing so is absolutely fundamental to our stepping into a really healthy, vibrant life where we are no longer surviving but thriving. Okay? So a couple of things to know about the relationship rights. Number one, you do not need to earn them. You don't have to go through hurdles or certain kinds of experiences to earn these rights. They are yours simply because you were born. It's really easy to understand this when you are in the presence of a newborn or a toddler, because I promise you, when you hear these 25 rights and you're in the presence of a newborn or a toddler, you would be able to say, with 100% certainty, this child is worthy and deserving of these 25 rights just because they were born and they are here. And yet, somehow we forget that. Or somehow we decide at some level, oh, I don't deserve these. Or I have to work my butt off in order to make myself or to be worthy of these rights. No, forget that right now. As of right now, there is nothing that you need to do to deserve these rights. You never need to explain or justify why you're living by these rights. You never need to explain or justify to another person who's violating these rights in you. You do not need to explain or justify why these rights are yours. Having these rights work for you and having them live in your life requires a dedication and a commitment right now that as of today, these become fundamentally part of who I am. And I know that I'm going to struggle with a lot of these because although they're going to make sense on an intellectual level, I haven't been practicing them. I haven't allowed them for myself. Okay? But deciding here and now that if I want to transform my social connections, my relational connections, which are so essential to my well-being, I have to make a decision that I'm claiming these for myself right now. And to be uncompromising. And this is where the notion of boundaries come in. If there's something that you hear today in these 25 rights that strikes you as so resonant, like almost like shakes you up to your core, I want you to maybe put a big circle around that right, or write that right down and say, about this, I will be uncompromising. That I will limit my exposure to anyone in my life who violates this in me. Or that's a relationship that I will shut down, because that, by the way, is a right. I have the right to shut a relationship down. I have the right to leave a relationship. So I want you to listen to these really carefully. I'm going to go through them slowly. I want you to ask yourself, to what degree is this right honored in my relationships? It might be honored in some and violated in others. And then, the harder question, but it's one that we have to ask. I mean, if I'm going to expect that these rights are going to be honored by others, I also have to honor them in others. And so really being honest with yourself about the ways in which you may have violated some of these rights in others, or maybe you currently do. Are you ready? Okay. Here we go. Number 1. This right, I believe, is foundational to all the rights, because if you don't honor this one for yourself, it's going to be really difficult to honor the others. I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect at all times, in all situations, at all ages and stages of my life, regardless of my age, regardless of my role, my status, my gender, and all previous experiences. So very simply, I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect at all times. And then I add in all situations, regardless of my age, my role, my status, all of my lived experience, regardless of my gender, my socioeconomic status, my cultural background. And the reason that I add all of those things is because I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect, whether I am a newborn infant, or the example that I always give, or my 96-year-old grandmother in late-stage Alzheimer's who's in a nursing home, and everything in between. Regardless of your age, it doesn't matter what your age is. It's not like the infant gets less dignity and respect because they haven't earned it yet, or they haven't lived long enough. It's not like the person in the nursing home with late-stage Alzheimer's, just because he or she can't remember, doesn't deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. It doesn't mean that because I'm a parent and have a child who's communicating with me or treating me in abusive ways, and just because I'm the parent and that's my role, I'm supposed to take that. And I could continue to give examples, but I think that you understand what I'm saying here, that this is something to be uncompromising about. And I think that that word dignity is really powerful, and whatever it conjures up for you. What does it mean for you to honor your own dignity? To demand of others that they treat you in a dignified way. In many ways, we really get to our core what respect means, and we often feel when we're not being respected. But I think dignity is an entirely different thing that ought to be also sort of contemplated. Like, what does that look like for you? Because I will tell you that when I think about times in my life where I allowed people to treat me in ways that did not honor my dignity, it felt so much worse than being disrespected. There is something that is very fundamental to your humanity when you are not being treated with dignity. Times in my life where I wasn't treated in ways that honored my dignity felt inhumane. So if you've ever been treated in a way that felt inhumane or deeply cruel, those are good indicators that your dignity was being violated. And those experiences can be etched very, very deeply into our minds and our hearts. Okay. So it's a really important right. It's number one. Number two, I have the right to follow my own values and standards. I may have been raised by certain values and standards. I may have been raised out of a certain belief system, but I have the right to claim for myself what values and standards I will live by. I don't even have to get into some sort of fierce disagreement with my first family about the values and standards that they raised me with. I don't have to even have a conversation with them about it. I can choose to live by values and standards that most matter to me, that make the most sense to me, and that are really aligned with who I am, because we've suffered enough trying to line up our values and standards with the people around us. And you all, at some level, have had the experience of living out of alignment. Like, that value or standard, it doesn't make sense to me. Or having the realization that I didn't choose this. I didn't choose this for myself. I'm always reminded of stories of the small child who's born into a family of physicians. Dad is a physician, grandpa is a physician, great-grandfather was a physician. That there's this, this generation after generation of physicians. So you have a little boy who's born into a family with this belief that you will be a physician. And on his first birthday, he's given a little toy Fisher-Price doctor's kit. You're going to be the greatest doctor. You're going to love being a doctor, just like daddy, just like grandpa, just like great-grandpa. And the seed is planted. This is who I will be. This is who I will become. And then that physician is 40 or 50 years of age and wakes up one morning in his 4,000-foot square home and looks out into the driveway at his or her beautiful cars and looks at it all and says, holy shit, I didn't choose this. I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. That was the calling of my heart. I wanted to teach kindergarten. And how difficult it is at that time in life then to reverse the path that wasn't chosen for you, or that you didn't choose, but instead was chosen for you. Very difficult, by the way. This is not easy. It would not be easy for that child at 8 years of age, at 18 years of age, at 28 years of age to have said, hey, family, I want to be a kindergarten teacher. Because of what sort of resistance that may have been met with. Now, that's a fairly simplistic example, but that happens. And I only share it with you because that happens. I remember when I was teaching years ago in Central Texas, I had a student who was at the university on a music scholarship, and she was a very gifted musician. And she was taking a couple of my classes in communication studies, and she decided, oh my God, I want to be a communication studies major. I love playing music, but this is not what I want to do professionally. And decided I've got to muster the courage to tell my family that this is what I really want to do. I am in love with this pathway, with this content. And went home over Thanksgiving break and made the announcement, I'm changing my major, which meant losing a scholarship. And the reaction from her parents was, okay, if you want to do that, you're on your own. We're cutting you off. And how devastating that was, because it was the expression of a dream that this student held that she wasn't sure she was going to be able to manifest without the financial support and the social support of her own family. And really became quite suicidal after that. I mean, that's an extreme example of this, where I'm choosing my own values and standards. I'm choosing who I am and who I want to become, and I'm honoring that. And what can happen and how we can feel when we don't honor that. And she did ultimately forge her pathway forward on her own, and it was very difficult. But the thought of not being in full alignment with what she most wanted was very, very painful. And again, she loved music. She was very good at it, but did not want to make a lifetime career from it. So in what ways, and there are little ways and there are very, very big ways in which I am almost certain that all of us here have abandoned ourselves in this way, that somehow believed that we could not honor our own values and standards for fear of deep, deep punishment, retribution, and even being cast out, disowned by our own families, if we were to dare to step up and say, this is who I am, and this is what I most want and need. We always say, God bless the child who makes that proclamation, who makes the proclamation, the declaration, this is who I am, this is what I most want and need, in a family within which that declaration had been declared by them, not by the child, because they're often met with great resistance. So it takes a lot of bravery and courage to forge your own path, but you have the right, and that is the point. You have the right. Third right. This is a big one. I have the right to say no and to not feel guilty. I have the right to say no as a complete sentence without having to offer a justification, an explanation, a rationalization for why I'm saying no. Just think about all of the time and all of the energy that you would save if you honored that right within yourself. Earlier, I talked about the role of gender in some of these rights, and we know studies have indicated that saying no as a complete sentence without, and this is why I'm saying no, without explaining why we're saying no, is actually a highly gendered style of communication that many women, not all, but many women believe that they have to offer that justification, explanation for why they're saying no. When many people hear, I have the right to say no as a complete sentence, it not only comes through as something that's somewhat startling, but it also comes through as something that, oh, I don't think that I could do that. I'm not sure that I can do that. And if you had that reaction to this right, just say to yourself, wow, that hits hard with me. I mean, it sort of really, hit me at my core. And I understand that that could lead to a lot of freedom and a lot of freed up energy if I don't have to explain or justify myself. But I'm not sure that I could change that. So what we want to do is practice it. Practice saying no, maybe once a day, or the next time you have to say no, practice saying no, period. And when you want to add on, just kind of call yourself back and say, I don't have to do that. Now, if you want to do that, that's a different story. If you feel you have to do that, you don't. And there are some things that we feel so strong about. We just can't do it, or we can't accept the invitation, or whatever it is. No. And we don't have to be aggressive. We don't have to be mean. We can say it very calmly and very firmly and very kindly. No. Okay. Fourth right. I have the right to both experience and to express all of my feelings. My feelings are part of what make me human. If I suppress what I'm feeling, if I repress, if I choke it back, swallow it down, I create infinitely more suffering. There's this book that was written many years ago, and I'm more drawn to the title of the book than the content. But the title of the book is Feelings Buried Alive, Stay Alive. And it's true. Everything we repress, suppress, choke back, swallow back down, everything that we bury alive, that we're feeling, the good, the bad, the ugly, stays alive inside of us. And the nature of that book is really about the way in which repressed, unspoken, suppressed feelings, when they're buried alive, ultimately contribute to very, very significant physical illnesses, anxiety and depression. So again, if you're here, part of why you're here may have been that you came from a first family, a family of origin, where feelings were not dealt with in a way that were healthy. You know, if you grew up in a home where, for example, children were to be seen and not heard, or if you grew up with a parenting philosophy like this, and many of you might relate to this, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Think about that message. Stop your feelings or I'm going to give you something to feel about. As if whatever it is that you were upset about or crying about, someone else from the outside is saying, your tears aren't valid. They're not appropriate or necessary to the situation. So if you're going to sit here and cry, I will give you something to cry about. Wow, in the life and in the mind of a child, that is an invitation for me to suppress, to repress, to choke back, swallow what I'm feeling. And what's really interesting about that is, so many of you know now that there are so many reasons why, for example, we might cry. I might cry because I'm grieving. I might cry in response to being physically hurt. I might cry in response to being emotionally hurt. I might cry because I'm moved by something that is of great beauty. I might cry in a moment of experiencing deep love and deep joy. All of that is allowed. All of it's allowed. Just imagine the kind of freedom that you would feel if you allowed yourself to feel all of it. Whatever it is, you have that right. Now, that said, there's a difference between feeling all of it and then figuring out what you're going to do about what you're feeling. I have the right to feel rage. I have the right to feel anger. I don't have the right to behave in an aggressive manner to another person or to people around me because I'm feeling rage and anger. I have the right to feel it all. And I also have the responsibility of expressing what I'm feeling in ways that are productive and healthy and appropriate. But many of us literally free ourselves from emotional jail when we honor this right in ourselves and when we honor this in other people. Imagine if you had this orientation toward the other people in your life. If you were able to be with them in such a way that your message was, I love you and I respect you, and I honor your dignity to feel whatever you're feeling. And it isn't my job, and it's not my responsibility to talk you out of how you're feeling, to try to fix it, to try to change it, to try to make it anything other than what it is. That is such a burden. If you're here, you may also suffer from the addiction of codependency. This need, strong, strong need to be needed. It's every bit as much of diseased behavior as our other addictive behaviors are. And it's real. And part of healing and recovery from codependency is really not only understanding that I don't have to fix you, I don't have to change you. Not only understanding it, but living that. That's something that I grapple with every single day. I have to be incredibly mindful of my strong, strong desire to fix, change, diminish what other people in my life who are hurting feel, to take that away from them. Not my job. And in many ways, when I do that, I am robbing them. I am robbing them. I'm violating this right in them. I am robbing them of their fundamental right to feel what they feel. Fifth right, and then we're going to take a break. I have the right to feel safe. I have the right to feel physically safe, emotionally safe, in all circumstances and with all people. Now, I have the right to feel physically safe. That makes a lot of sense to most of us here. And many of us have likely lived through situations where we didn't feel physically safe, and you know what that's like. Having the right to feel emotionally safe is something very different, and something that might be a little more difficult for us to believe to be true and to expect in our relationships. Because if again and again and again, I'm going back to, or I'm engaging in a relationship within which I am not emotionally safe, I'm violating this right in myself. There are lots of different ways to think about how we are made to feel emotionally unsafe. And most of the time, that comes through in the way in which another person is dealing with us verbally and non-verbally. Name calling, for example. Using harsh, abusive language in their interaction with us. Putting us down, being incredibly critical, treating us in ways that are contemptuous. Treating us in ways where we are made to feel invisible, as if we don't exist, giving us the silent treatment. These are all ways in which we are not safe in our relationships. And I have the right to feel safe. So I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. I have the right to follow and live by my own standards and values. I have the right to say no as a complete sentence and not feel guilty about it. I have the right to experience and to express how I feel, to not choke that back, and I have the right to feel physically and emotionally safe. So I want to take a pause here, and I would love to open this up to have any of you who want to kind of share some of how this, what like most resonated with you, what caught your attention, what rights are you really, really good about honoring in yourself, and where could you use strength? Or when you think about your own recovery, is there one or more of these rights that you just, this has to be fiercely protected in order for me to stay sober? This has to be very, very strongly protected. I've got to honor this right in order for me to move forward in a healthy fashion. So, or whatever you want to say about all of this. Unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Liza.
Hi, Liza.
And I can relate to all of those. Of course, I resonate, for myself the most with the right to follow my own path and that kind of thing. The idea that, a path was kind of, set up for me, by my parents, when I was young, because they were both in the medical profession. And they thought the next logical step for their child to be more successful than they are, which a lot of parents want for their kids, was to become a doctor.
Right.
And from, and not really so much a really early age, but once I really started to show like any kind of leaning towards that and that kind of thing, that's, oh my gosh, that's what she can do. And, they had like all these plans and I'm like, I don't think I want to do this. So, I have a lot, I don't think I really explored what I really wanted to do, partially because they were so set on that. And there were, to me, there were a lot of indicators that that was not right, but not to them. So I kind of started on that path, but I was always looking for an out, a way to get around it, maybe keep them happy, but, do something more that I wanted to do. But I couldn't even get into exploring what I wanted to do because, very honestly, and once I got, into higher education and everything, doing the stuff that was going to get me on that path. So I finally found my way around it. I remember one difficult conversation with my father where I finally told him, he asked, he said, "Don't you want to be a doctor?" And I think I was actually I was going to either going to start graduate school or something like that, but it was not medical school. And I finally had to say, because I said, I got to get off this train. It was out of desperation. I said, I can't keep having this conversation. I can't keep leading these people down this path. I can't keep leading myself down this path. I said, no, I don't want to be. And it was hard to see the look on his face, but I did it and I did feel, a big sense of relief. But I still spent a lot of my educational and then the beginning of my professional life, am I doing something that's almost as good enough? And I did enjoy it for a long time, you know, and I guess by society standards, I certainly was successful. I got a job where I made a lot of money, and then the whole thing kind of collapsed. As my active addiction took off, the whole thing collapsed. I got laid off from my job, partially because I was in treatment and a lot of other things went on. And, and then, I kind of was forced by circumstance to follow another path. So I did follow my strong avocation for, a while. I worked in that for a while. And that's one thing recovery absolutely gave me, a gift that I followed my avocation, even though I didn't make any money compared to what I made before, but I made enough. And I found for myself that I made enough and that I could do other things besides what I thought I had to do. Because after a while, when you're doing something for so long, you think that's all you can do. I spent so much time in school and I spent so much time working, that's all I can do. I'm not good at anything else. And I found I was good at other stuff. And I keep finding out as I keep going along now in my professional life, I am good at a lot of other things that I never thought I would be good at. Would I ever thought I would be good being what they call a receptionist, talking on the phone to other people? Well, I'm finding out right now I'm doing okay because I am talking to all kinds of people on the phone right now. People who are struggling, people who are, struggling with this addiction terribly. People are struggling to get help. People, family members who are, like, what do I do? I never thought I would be good at that. Never ever. I never took one. I think I went out of communications in college because I took some kind of test and they said, okay, you don't have to take those classes. I said, thank goodness. Because at the time I was like, no, that is not what I want to do. That's not what I'm good at. And that sort of thing. So, following my own path. And I guess that, that is a right that's strong to me because now people ask me, why don't you go back to what you did before? You made a lot of more money. And I'm like, that stopped working for me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you don't need money. Yeah, you got to pay the rent, you got to live inside, got to have food, but I can, and it's working out okay, and I found out, that, what exactly I really do, need financially to live, and that kind of thing, and it's not all some of the stuff I had. So, that right really resonated with me. And I would never have found it actually if I hadn't gone into recovery, if I hadn't gone through some of the misery I went through.
Yeah.
Some of it I brought on myself because I kept trying to get back. I guess that's all I have. Thanks.
That's great. A couple of things about what you just said. One is how long we can stay on a certain path because of it's expected of us. When you think about how long it took for you to have that conversation with your father, that can be some amazing, like that kind of conversation can be years in the making and completely terrifying. Someone once said to me, it often takes roughly a 30-second conversation to say what it is that you need to say to set yourself free and on a totally different path. Maybe you and your dad talked for an hour about this, but it probably took you about 30 seconds to make it very clear to him in that conversation that you did not want to be a doctor. And the second thing that struck me about what you said is how oftentimes it is our recovery and our stepping onto that path that leads us into our vocation and sort of opens up these doors where we start learning things about ourselves and things that we can do in ways that we can be in the world that we never ever would have imagined enjoying, or we never would have imagined having a gift or talent at. I was reminded earlier this week of an image that I've long held about freedom, recovery and freedom. And it's this image that appears in my mind like a painting, like I would love to have someone paint this for me. And it's an image of myself sitting in a small jail cell on a chair. And I'm looking straight ahead at the bars of the jail. And in my hand, which I'm holding in my lap, in my hand is a key. And I'm looking straight ahead, waiting to be let out of jail without the realization that the key, I'm holding the key, and I've been holding the key the entire time. I just need to get up and unlock myself. And choosing the path of recovery is a great way to get up. You actually got up off the chair. You were terrified, but you got up off the chair. You opened up the jail cell and you walked forward, not even knowing what you were walking into, because you've only known thus far, you've only known the prison of it all. And so there are lots of different ways that we use that key. And one of those ways is when we make the decision that I'm going to have that conversation. Or maybe it's no conversation at all. Maybe it's just I set forth in a way that it's evident to everyone that I am now living on my own terms, by my own values and standards. I'm using the key that's been in my lap the whole time, and I'm setting myself free. So your story for me is one of freedom. That's the theme. You set yourself free. Someone else?
Good morning.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Rose.
Oh, all right. Yeah, the only reason I'm really up and awake right now is because my anxiety. I'm not a morning person, but when I go to sleep with something on my mind, I'll wake up with a lot of anxiety, and that'll keep me up. So my relationships have definitely been affected lately, and I can relate to all these things. You know, I've really fought for these my whole life. I fought for them as an adult. I was fighting as a teenager, and I did a lot of rebelling. But now that I'm a parent, I don't get any of this shit from my kids, and it's driving me crazy. I'm constantly being disrespected. You know, I could practice these things, saying no, that's a complete sentence, blah, 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 but nobody gives a shit. And like, it's just really driving me crazy. But like, I'm also trying to like make sure that my kids are okay. Like, I'm treating them with respect and they feel safe and all this stuff. But, you know, I fall short a lot, especially lately. So it's like this vicious circle, like this cycle of the way my parents raised me, and then having to like get over that and find my own voice and figure out how to respect and love myself, and creating boundaries and all this shit that I've had to learn over the years. And now I'm not getting it from my kids, but like, I also don't want to be like my parents, you know, how they treated me. And it wasn't terrible, but like, you know, there's things that I'm repeating that I know weren't that great. So it's just, you know, my relationships have definitely been affected lately, mostly with my children, because we're just together all the time, and I just really want to escape. I just want to run away for like a day, at least just a day. They'd be fine, I think, but that's about it. Thanks.
I can't fathom what it would be like to be at home all day with kids. I think if you understand the value of school as not just being a place of higher learning, but as being a place for them to be, to socialize with their own peer group and all of that. So I think that what you're going through is inherently stressful and very normal. But what struck me most about your story was coming from a family where, you know, as you come into your adulthood and you're becoming a mother, you don't want to repeat that. You want to do something else. And so sometimes it's feeling like I've lived both of these extremes. I've lived both of these extremes, and then I see what's showing up, because I went to the other extreme, is that my children are not treating me with respect. You know, they're not validating, you know, who I am, that kind of thing. And so it's sort of being really, really patient and kind with yourself, and knowing and leaning into this idea that if you can honor these rights first within yourself, like if you could give these to you, you might, and don't even think about your kids giving these to you, but if I can give these things, if I can treat myself, honor these rights within myself first, and let that be your focus, you might start to see a change in how they're being with you. I'm glad you're here with us so
Thank
early
you.
this morning.
Thanks.
How about one more share before we sign off?
Thank you. My name is Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
So just very quickly, so I think I'm in the beginning of trying to do what's good and right for me, trying to do the right things for the right reasons. But with, however, that being said, I don't know how to go about that, and I realize that. But with the words that you're using today, like dignity and respect and my values, standards, I don't know fully what they are, but I know what the beginnings of them are. I just don't quite know how to approach heading that way. So that's why hearing what you say in the morning, using these words for my own heart to know that this is what my heart is hungry for, but I'm out there and I'm out, not just out and about around. So it's a very fearful place for me right now, because even when I've tried to express those, I get very trembly inside. My palms get very sweaty, but that's okay. I believe something good will come out of it, and I probably won't always be like that, but there's absolutely no way that I would be able to continue walking forward if I didn't have the guidance and direction. I absolutely have a few quality people that I reach out to just to hear that, yes, to keep moving forward, that's okay to do these kinds of things, to express, to hear these words from you this morning, even just the 5. I don't know what the other ones are, but this is a lot for me this morning, and means a lot because it's like I'm going into it all blind. I want it, I just don't know how to go about it yet, and it's coming out the wrong way. So thank you. So I'm in the beginnings of what you're talking about. So thanks, that's all I have.
Thank you. And you really captured it when you said I'm walking into this blind, because so many of us walked into it blind, still feel blind. I mean, this is not familiar territory. As good as this stuff sounds, like, I think there isn't anyone here who wouldn't agree that these are really good things and could get behind even just these first 5. But how you actually live in this way is where you can sort of feel blind, because many of us didn't have a model for this. We just didn't. So even just taking with you as you leave today's session, what does dignity mean to me? What does being treated in a respectful manner mean to me? What are my own values and standards? Again, I think we'd all agree that we all have the right to live by our own values and standards. But that only makes sense to the degree that we know what are my values and standards. And for many of us, that's part of the journey right now, is figuring that out. Because we, for whatever reason, never had the opportunity to figure that out, or the values and standards were imposed upon us in very very strong ways that made it fearful, very, very fearful, to claim our own values and standards. So next time we'll move through the next 5 or 7 or however many. I think it's important to move through these very slowly, to really take in what they mean. Before we go, if you have a pen or something to write on, I just want to leave you with a question. And maybe later today, if you take just 3 to 5 minutes, this is another freedom exercise. If you could take 3 to 5 minutes sometime today, or even every day between now and the next time I see you, maybe to come into just sort of a quiet meditative state, but hold this question. What is here now? If there is no problem to solve, what is here now? If there is no problem to solve? And that might not even make any sense to you right now, but if you sit with it, and you sit with it for a couple of days, this is an example of using the key to unlock yourself. What is here right now if there is no problem to solve? You can find a lot of sanctuary in that. That's all I'll say about it. So thank you. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and I'll see you next week, and we'll journey through some more of these relational rights.
Thank you, Christine.
You are
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Bye-bye.
See you next
Thanks.
week.